My name is Bianca, and I build software for the government. That's the most interesting thing about it. And I build software for the government in an open way. And I'm going to talk about the experience that we made in this project called GA-Lotse. It's a software package or a software platform for public health officers. So the things that you probably knew from the pandemic, where we had some problems with infectious diseases, when we had some problems with data exchange, and so on and so forth. I am the product owner, tech lead for this project, but I'm not alone in this project. We have many people which join me in this project to develop it. And I'm going to explain to you what public health officers do. In German, it's a Gesundheitsamt. And then I'm going to go to the challenges that we had in procurement, in developing this solution, and to grow this solution, because building open source for the German government is not always that easy. And we're going to see how it went and probably what you can learn from it to grow open source in the public sector, especially in Germany. I work for the city of Frankfurt, for the public health department of Frankfurt, but it's a corporation of the Gesundheitsamt Frankfurt and the Ministry of long title for Family, Health and Care in Hesse, and we are funded by European Union, so that's for the logo wall you see here. All these are probably more or less involved in this project, at least from a financial or political perspective. The things that public health departments do are, we try to protect and improve the people's health, so the entire population. Usually we do things like we care for infectious diseases. You probably heard from us in the COVID pandemic. We also do things like vaccination, we do hygiene supervision, and we also do things like HIV surveillance and other things. We also care for children and youth health, and we also do health reports. When a civil servant is introduced into his office, we check for their health, if it's good to start this job. And what we also do, we do most of the time statistics about the things that we do. Is the population getting sicker in a specific area? Are the kids growing taller or smaller? And so on and so forth. So basically, we are the people that know what's happening with the people's health. We had a problem with public health in 2021 or 2022. Because we had some data exchange problems. We are the people with the fax machines here in Germany, so we basically exchange data via paper, more or less. And then came the European Union and told us here's some funding to improve the digital situation for the public health departments. So then there was this cooperation from the public health department in Frankfurt at the Main and the Ministry for Social Affairs in Hesse. And we thought about, okay, let's build a new project, new software for public health officers. The things to get open source projects started in Germany is basically, the situation is as the following. We have basically something like guidelines for how to build software for government. There are must criteria that you have to build software in an open source way when you create new software. We are creating new software, so we should have built this under an open source, in an open source way, but politically that's not enough. They say, okay, here's a must criteria in architecture guidelines that we don't care. So next thing, funding guidelines in the fund for Next Generation EU is something like you are encouraged to share this software via open source. That's also not enough. And then we have also something like laws, the law for the Onlinezugangsgesetz or e-government law in Germany, where there's some criteria that you should build software in an open source way. That's also not enough. What helped us to convince our ministry to build this in an open source way were two things. We have to prevent double funding of funds for the same thing twice. So we thought about, when we are transparent in a proactive way, we can not get blamed for having double funded something, so let's be open by default, and then we have no problems because we are always transparent and always good in communicating with others, that we don't develop the same software twice. That was one argument, and the other argument was, yeah, it's what easy from my side because I do very interesting things in my spare time, like breaking the electronic health record in Germany. So I told them it's not a good idea to do this not in an open source way, because then people like me will come and say, that's bad what you have done because you have wasted public money, because public money, public code. So they realized, okay, it would be good to develop this project in an open source way because it's better for the reputation, and it's also good for transparency to prevent double funding. The learning from all these things is basically, when we don't have strict laws which enforce open source for government software, nothing will happen. So we will need to have laws which enforce open source. Otherwise, there will always be some argument against open source from inside the government. So that's the short history about how we got this software to be open source. So what it takes to make a government software in open source are basically three things. You need someone inside the government which tries to encourage open source, which is basically me in this project. You need a good lawyer with experience in open source, like procurement, contracts, and licensing. The funny thing is about licensing is probably you open source people know really well about licensing. Not all lawyers know about the difference between the different licenses. And we also need to have a software provider that wants to build solutions and not to sell products. So we had to make a procurement and find the right software provider which will develop our solution for us. And yeah, how did we do this? When you have a procurement, you have basically two steps where you can shape criteria for finding a right provider. The first step is you try to find some software for eligibility. So is the provider capable of doing something? And the interesting thing is about the procurement in this aspect was that we had no specific criteria for open source for the eligibility, because we wanted to have a really good software developer, and we thought about open source from a development standpoint for individual software is not important in the first step, but in the second step. And the second criteria that we have is like evaluation criteria, which basically try to rank the different offers from providers, and the best one in price and quality will win. So we basically try to create specific criteria to find the best partner for developing an open source software. And what's also important to tell you is that we, as the city of Frankfurt, get the code and we put the open source license on that code on our own. So we need to find a good software provider, and we introduced some open source criteria in rating these providers. For example, we checked for their team members, for the key team members, are there some open source maintainers? Do they have some open source experience? Then we let the provider write a concept for the software. What are the building blocks for the software? Are these sustainable open source building blocks? Has the company even done some upstream contribution to these projects? Then we have rated the concept for the documentation. So how well will the development process be documented? And are there some best practices used for documentation? And what we also did rate was how well was the software tested? And is the testing concept usable for other contributors. So these were basically the evaluation criteria to find our perfect software partner to develop the software. So it's basically a way to try to rate the way that people will, create good open source software with us together. And these are some criteria which we used and which worked pretty well, we would say, to find the perfect partner for us to develop the software. When I say what are the partners and how large is this project, we have a budget of approximately 24 million euros over 3 years. So it's basically a big project. And we are also a big team. We have, in the city of Frankfurt, a team of about 15 people, which try to steer the project from inside the government. And we have development partners from up to 60 developers. The company that has won the tender was Kron from Bonn. And we also have some experts for security, data protection, accessibility, and our team was at the biggest 130 persons at the same time. So it's basically, a medium-sized software project, we would say. At least for a government project, it's pretty large. So what are the challenges for this project? This is the more technical part of what we are doing and why we are doing it this way and where open source is probably helpful. In the federal state of Hesse, we have 25 health departments with a diverse set of business modules and configurations. They're using specialist applications. That's basically the backbone of the government data. So where all your personal data from different government contexts belong to, or different health contexts with the Gesundheitsamt. And the interesting thing about it is these are 25 health departments and nothing, not one is completely identical to the other. It's basically a really diverse set of the way they work. And that's, German federalism. It makes things interesting to build software, but it's important to realize that you have to deal with it. Otherwise, it won't work. We have a high bar for security and for data protection. We have a varying level of IT know-how for the various health departments. And we have the problem that it should be scalable, extensible. We had a tight timeline. The first software iteration was developed under a year. And the entire project is controlled from within the public administration. Sometimes it's probably the first big software project for them to do this in this way. But I think it worked out pretty well. What we are doing is we thought about, okay, instead of complaining about federalism in the German government, we build a really federated system. That's basically a decentralized system on a centralized cloud environment. It can run in clouds, it is cloud native, it can also run on-premise, it can basically run on anything that is capable of delivering some Kubernetes layer, more or less. It's built after the zero trust paradigm, and it has a really tight directive for security by design and privacy by design. It does DevSecOps, and it is provided as software as a service for the state of Hesse, but there are also other federal states which will use the software in a different way because they can use it because it's open source. So what we are building is basically a service mesh for various health departments. We, for example, have here the city of Frankfurt, which has different business modules which are connected together. We have also components which are centralized for the entire federal state or even Germany. And we have connections in between via service mesh. And what we also have is different services for a health department. So basically things like we have centralized our base data for our citizens and companies. Then we have something like inventory, resources, and so on and so forth, user management, calendars for people. We rely on Keycloak as an identity access management, and we also have a reusable statistics engine to get statistic data from this or data that we have in these various business modules. So it's basically a really distributed systems, but you can run it on a standardized cloud environment. So what else do we have? I said privacy by design. We have something like a once-only technical system. We call it centralfied or Stammdatenkonverter in German, which basically handles all the different base data of people, like name, addresses, and so on and so forth, that we don't have to have different file states in different business modules, but it's not connected via unique identifier, so it's basically privacy by design. But because even if you break one business module, you won't have any connections to other business modules and so on and so forth. So that was important to at least me, and other people like it as well, because data protection officers are really happy about it, that you don't have something in a centralized database. So that is the things that we do from the technical side. There's some orchestration involved. Right now it's running on a managed Kubernetes on top of OpenShift. And yeah, we have central services for the federal state of Hesse. And so basically a health department consists of about 21 modules. And yeah, what else do we have? Something like more databases, Redis, Nginx. Basically this entire system has 2 different portals for any health departments. We have a citizen portal for the citizens, for the to make some appointments. We have also an employee portal for the employees of the health department. And I told you about the theory. How does it look? So basically like this. It's a web application which tries also to look very nice, because people in the health departments also are people which want nice looking applications, and we try to have, yeah, at least good user experience. It's basically a very, yeah, specialist applications for, this is for school entry examination of children. Things like, yeah, how good is their language, and so on and so forth. What else do we have? We do have some statistics which try to collect data from different business modules. And what else do we have is something like statistics from the population data, which this is also important to get an idea about, are there some specific values of diseases alarming in a specific area of a municipality or a state. And what else do we have is a citizen portal for the citizens to get an appointment. So the things that we did, we licensed it from the city of Frankfurt. We have a dual licensing because we thought about 2 things. We want to enable other partners to use our stacks, so the base components are very permissive, Apache 2. And we also have the problem that all other business modules in this area are proprietary, so we made the business modules with the specific public health contents, copyleft, to keep them open. Here's a short introduction about our tech stack, things that you probably know, like Keycloak, Nginx Synapse. We also have a matrix integration. It's running on Docker and Kubernetes, using Postgres, and so on and so forth. And the most important thing about it, that we are very happy about it, we also starting to have some cooperations. And as an advice for how to get people to cooperate with you is, yeah, you first have to build a very good digital product, and you shouldn't sell it by, okay, it's open source, it's cool. Yeah, open source is cool, but it has to be a good product. But open source is like the cherry on top. And what we also, especially for government software, realized that it's very helpful is the focus on security and privacy from the beginning, and the focus on usability. And then we have things for. What was also helpful to keep it growing is the freedom of operation or hosting. If you give government entities the ability to run this software on their own or in different environments, that's also helpful. Modularity is also a key part of this thing, and the possibility to share the same code base. But we know that the German government is running on very different configurations, so we've basically built something like an ecosystem for different things, because the German government is really diverse in itself. Yeah, and right now we are happy that we started as a software for the state of Hesse. Finally, we have a cooperation with Bavaria. For the people which are from Germany know that cooperations with Bavaria are not that easy, let's call it that way. But they're building a citizen portal which tries to connect with the GA-Lotse components in the backend. And we also in talks with other federal states to reuse the software. They will have to adapt it to their legislation, but they can share the code base. And we also will talk with vendors to build business modules. And the other things that we do is we also support things in secure multi-party computation to enable even more secure data exchange between these modules. So then I'm at the end of my presentation. Here's the repository and documentation. The entire code and the entire stack is publicly available on open code. It's hopefully well documented in English and should run fine. And then I will head over to the questions.
Thank you. Since you're handling health data, does this count as software as a medical device? And if so, how did you handle the risk assessment for open source components?
Yeah, the software on its own is no medical device. That's good because it makes things easier. Easier in a regard that it's still health data, and then we have some special requirements, like you have to have a private cloud instance, have a separate hypervisor, and so on and so forth, but it's no medical device.
Do you have to deal with a situation where each part of the city has its own Gesundheitsamt and they have their own databases? Or like in Berlin, we have different health agencies and they used to be separate. Now I don't know if they still are. But do you have this situation?
Yeah. The funny thing is that because the situation with these different databases and they're really split apart, is that we build it this way. So basically, every health department gets its own instance with itself up to 10 separate databases, but we build a nice interface and nice integration on top of it that it can be separated, but it will work together. So that's basically, the service mesh concept to keep this databases separate, but give them the ability to generate statistics and to exchange these between different health departments.
Thank you. That was a really interesting presentation, so thank you very much indeed for that. One of the things you were talking about is when you were selecting suppliers, you were saying that you have to be careful to make sure that you know that they understand open source development. Do you have a sort of formal framework for doing that? Because I tend to use OpenChain as a framework. I'm recommending that you ask a bunch of questions that align with OpenChain to find out the capabilities of potential suppliers.
Yeah, the funny thing about it is that we are basically building the software in a greenfield approach. So we basically have to, if we would buy, for example, if we have a procurement for integration of, I don't know, Matrix or something else, that's a different way to procure software, because we use this information more or less to get a feeling about if their claims are valid, more or less. But it depends on the type of software that you're developing. What's the right criteria that you're building on the top of it?
That's great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Do you feel that it was harder to find a proper partner for the software development or to convince the state government to go open source?
The second one, I would say, the later. Yeah, convincing, yeah, the state government is harder than to find a supplier, because when you give people the ability to publish their things and be open with what they are doing, they will gonna do it. But from a political standpoint, it's not that common to be transparent about what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
And that more or less brings us to time. Thank you so, so much. It was a really fantastic presentation. One more round of applause.